To become as prosperous as today, China also went through a lot of serious wrongdoing and had to pay a very heavy price. One of the mistakes that China's leaders also have to admit is the Cultural Revolution or 10 years of disaster. So let's learn about this historic event. On May 16, 1966, Mao Zedong stood up to initiate and lead the Cultural Revolution with the goal of fighting the bourgeoisie and changing the face and spirit of Chinese society. However, many historians argue that it was really just a power grab. But Mao Zedong was at that time the head of the party and already had full of power. For the answer, let's go back to the Great Leap Forward stage. In 1958, Mao Zedong urged the people to lead the country to a self-sufficient society. To achieve this goal, he initiated the Great Leap Forward plan. Then, he set up units called People's Communes in the countryside, mobilized many communities and populations to produce steel, increased agricultural output. But in reality, agricultural production at that time was very low, even said to be not equal to that of the Jinlong and Jin emperors. The Great Leap Forward was an economic failure. The industry had fallen into disrepair. The fact that workers produced too much steel while other industries were abandoned. Moreover, people were forced to use steel to the point that they even had to use farming stones made from steel. This had led to a decline in the output of all those commodities. Worse, to avoid penalties, local governments report more fictitious figures than actual output. Chinese economy once again fell into crisis. Food shortage caused starvation for 20 to 30 million people. The failure of the Great Leap Forward had a major impact on Mao Zedong's reputation. In 1959, he had to resign as president, and then Liu Shaoqi took over. Since then, within the Chinese party, many factions had been formed, including Mao Zedong's faction and the President Liu Shaoqi's faction. The president at that time and the general secretary had a move that was more open and supported, but deviated from Mao Zedong's ideas. So Mao Zedong decided to take action and uphold the idea in order to put power back into his own hands. Chairman Mao Zedong declared in his speech for the Cultural Revolution that elements of the bourgeoisie had infiltrated in the internal affairs of the Chinese government and society. We were having a great conspiracy that is to restore capitalism and to promote the spirit of supporters. He determined to wipe out capitalist roots. He personally swam across the vast Yangtze River, which is 100 meters at the age of 73. Mao Zedong's thought were supported by the masses, especially the youth and the students. They have set up the teams that were growing rapidly and were scattered all over China. In just a few months, a full-scale movement under the slogan Chinese Cultural Revolution aimed at breaking down old culture, old thinking, and old customs ranged across the country. Those from landowners, rich peasants, reactionaries, or bad actors were among the first to be punished. Previous groups have smashed, closed schools, beaten teachers. Some were even beaten to death. They also destroyed a lot of monuments, places of historical value, and burned many documents. Millions of officials were exiled to the countryside for hard labor. Millions of others were also beaten, killed, or forced to commit suicide. Even the remains of historical figures were also exhumed. The Cultural Revolution was declared over 1969, but it continued until 1976. So what did the Cultural Revolution bring to China? First, the president and the general secretary were removed from office, power concentrated in the hands of Mao Zedong. According to an article in 2008, The Cultural Revolution led to the exile of 2.3 million officials, causing the deaths of several top leaders such as the President Liu Shaoqi. The movement has also caused economic damage of about 5 billion yuan, and a lot of historical sites were abandoned. School closures cost millions of people the opportunity to study. Later, the Chinese during the Cultural Revolution were honed, the generation that were left and useless, because they weren't educated. It is estimated that between 12 and 20 million people have to do hard labor in the countryside, including 1 million in Shanghai. 18% of the population here, an estimated 7.7 million Chinese had been killed, along with about 1.5 million deaths related to hunger and conflict. The total number of deaths reached 9.2 million people. About 3 million Chinese party members were disciplined and imprisoned. About 60% of party members were expelled. In 1980, General Secretary Hu Yaoguang said that about 100 million Chinese people suffered hardly during the Cultural Revolution. Thanks for watching the video. See you next time.